Would you still smile at someone you'd already made sure couldn't get home? My dad did. He dropped me at the wrong curb, waved like it was any other Tuesday, and pulled away before I reached the doors. 9 minutes later, his SUV came flying back into that same lane, too late. He didn't lose me by accident. He lost me on purpose, and it ended up costing him almost everything he had left. Subscribe before you keep going, because what my family did next is worse than anything I've told you so far, and what I did back is why none of them speak to me now. My name is Vanessa Whitfield. I'm 38 years old, and 90 minutes before that SUV came screaming back, I was standing at a kiosk inside Portland International Airport, staring at a boarding pass that no longer existed. The gate agent checked my confirmation twice. Then she told me the reservation had been canceled online less than an hour earlier, by the same person who'd booked it. Then his text came through. Walk home. 2 words. I read them twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it, then typed back 3 of my own. You sure about that? I called my mom. No answer. My brother. No answer. My sister. No answer. Then I called the one relative who actually knew what was going on, and the whole thing cracked open in about 4 sentences. I didn't cry at that kiosk. I didn't make a scene. I opened a rideshare app, requested a car, and got in the back seat while my dad's SUV was still circling the terminal loop looking for me. By the time we hit the highway, his name had called 11 times. I let every single one go to voicemail and opened my banking and travel apps instead. The vacation house in La Jolla, a 3-row SUV rental, and a prepaid harbor cruise, all of it booked under my name and paid for with my own card. I canceled the house and the SUV while they were still inside their refund windows. Cruise only offered credit, not cash, so I shifted that credit into my own travel account instead. I want to be clear about something because people are going to accuse me of theft in the comments before this video is even half over. I didn't touch a single one of my parents' airline tickets. I didn't take $1 that belonged to anyone else. I removed reservations that I had personally made with my own money under my own name. That's it. Then I called my Aunt Pat. She picked up on the second ring, and her first question told me everything. Is this about the financing? Did he cancel your seat because you turned him down on the equipment loan? That single sentence told me this wasn't a joke that got out of hand. This was a plan. My dad, Gerald Whitfield, owns a commercial HVAC installation company outside Beaverton. 3 weeks before that trip, he'd asked me to co-sign a loan for a new fabrication rig and a second service truck, $340,000 with a monthly payment north of $6,000. His company's books couldn't support that kind of debt on their own, so the lender wanted my income behind it. I read the terms. I ran the numbers the same way I run them every day at my job. I underwrite risk for a marine insurance carrier in Portland. My whole career is built around spotting a bad bet before it turns into a disaster. I told my dad this one was a bad bet and I wasn't going to guarantee it. He didn't yell. He just went quiet. I should have known that meant something was coming. Here's the part that's going to make you uncomfortable, so stick around because it gets worse before it gets better. For 4 years, I had quietly been the thing holding this family together financially, and none of them ever said it out loud. I paid a chunk of my sister Brooke's dental hygiene tuition directly to her school. I covered the monthly note on the box truck my dad's install crews used every day. When my parents fell behind on their county property taxes, I negotiated the payment plan myself and covered the first few installments so they wouldn't lose the house. I put down a refundable deposit on a van and equipment package so my brother Tyler could launch a mobile pet grooming business he'd been talking about for 2 years. And the trip, my mom's 60th birthday, the one everyone kept calling the real family celebration, I paid for most of the house, the rental car, and the activities. My dad bought the plane tickets so we'd all be booked together, and I reimbursed him for my seat that same day. None of this was ever framed as a loan. Nobody signed anything. It was always, "We'll get you back eventually," or, "You know we appreciate this," said once and never brought up again. I told myself that was fine because I genuinely wanted to help. I liked being the person who made things easier for people I loved. I didn't realize that liking it had turned into an assumption on their end, that my income wasn't really mine anymore. It was a shared resource they could draw from whenever their own math didn't add up. I wasn't keeping score. I was just quietly there every time for everyone. That was about to change. Stick around because this is where it actually turns. The voicemail my dad left me an hour later is the moment I stopped being confused and started paying attention. My aunt kept going. She said my dad had complained to her that I'd forgotten who helped put me where I am. He'd told her I was getting too big for myself, questioning his loan like that. And then he said the part ones still think about, that if the family went cold on me for a while, I'd remember where my loyalty was supposed to sit. I opened my banking app while she was still talking. The tuition transfer scheduled for the following month? Voluntary. Cancelled. The automatic payment on the company truck? Voluntary. Stopped. The gift I'd been sending toward my parents' property taxes? Gone. My brother's refundable equipment deposit? I requested it back. It was mine to begin with. I left every payment that had already gone through completely alone. I wasn't taking anything back. I was just done handing more of it out. Then I saved everything. Screenshots of the canceled airline booking, my reimbursement receipt, and the walk-home text, all forwarded to my aunt and to a folder that would matter a lot more later. My dad's voicemail came in an hour later, and his voice had lost every bit of the confidence from that text. Vanessa, this got out of hand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You've got this idea that because you help out, you get to run everything. Put the house and the SUV back the way they were, and we'll figure out the rest once you land. My mom's message landed 60 seconds after his. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask where I was standing when the ticket vanished. She asked me to put the vacation house back before their flight took off. I sent one reply. No. They boarded anyway. My dad genuinely thought he could rebuild the whole trip after they landed. He couldn't. Everything available in La Jolla on short notice cost triple what I'd paid months earlier, and every rental car left was either too small or way outside what he was willing to spend. They spent one night at an airport hotel, argued through dinner, and flew home to Portland the next morning. The second they landed, my dad sent a message to the whole family saying I'd ruined Mom's birthday with an emotional outburst over a harmless joke. I didn't respond. I watched his flight status change to arrived, closed the app, and waited because I already knew there was more than one thing I'd canceled that week. 3 days after they got home, my sister Brooke texted me a screenshot from her college portal. Her tuition installment for the dental hygiene program hadn't gone through. You must have put in the wrong date, she wrote. Registration closes Friday. Can you fix this today? No mention of the airport. Not one word. I told her I hadn't made a mistake. I'd ended every voluntary payment I was making for this family. She called me within a minute, insisting she hadn't canceled my ticket. I told her I knew that. My question was why she got on a plane knowing I'd been stranded on purpose. The silence on the other end of that call told me everything before she even said it out loud. Here's something my dad never expected. One of his own guys called me before I even reached out to anyone else in the family. Walt Sorensen had been my dad's foreman for almost 15 years. He called my cell that same week, sounding like he didn't really want to be making the call. He said he'd overheard my dad bragging in the shop 2 days before the trip, telling one of the crew leads that she'll be humbled by the time we land, and she'll be booking herself a ticket to catch up with us. Walt said it had bothered him enough that he needed me to hear it from someone who wasn't trying to get anything from me. That's when I understood this had never been a joke that spiraled. It had been planned, timed, and bragged about in advance. My brother Tyler called that same afternoon. His equipment supplier told him the reservation on the grooming van and tools would expire unless he completed the purchase, and the deposit I'd put down had already landed back on my card, exactly where it belonged. You promised to help me launch, he said. I told him I'd promised before he stood there and laughed while our dad planned to leave me at an airport. Then the truck lender called Tyler's business line after the automatic payment failed to arrive. He called me from the dealership, panicked, saying he'd lose active job sites if they repossessed the truck. I reminded him the truck belonged to Whitfield Mechanical. It was never mine. It never had been. A few days later, I got an email that changed the whole shape of this story. Ellen Cho, the loan officer handling my dad's equipment financing, reached out about a form he needed my signature on to formally close out the application. Almost as a side note, he mentioned this hadn't been my dad's first attempt. The bank had already turned him down once, 5 weeks before that trip, for not having enough collateral on his own. He only came to me with the cosign request 2 weeks after that rejection, which lines up exactly with the ask I turned down 3 weeks before we ever left for the airport. That timeline told me everything I needed to know. My dad hadn't come to me because he trusted my judgment. He'd come to me because the bank already said no, and I was the last option he had left. When I said no too, he built a punishment out of it. I saved that email the way I'd saved everything else. Relatives started reaching out around then too. A cousin asked why I'd exploded over a missed flight. An uncle said family disagreements shouldn't get in the way of my sister's education. Someone else claimed I'd canceled my mom's birthday trip out of nowhere, no context at all. My aunt sent me screenshots from a family group chat I wasn't part of. My dad had written that I'd had an emotional outburst over a scheduling mix-up and was now using money to control everyone. My mom wrote that she was worried I wasn't myself. They weren't apologizing. They were building a story to isolate me before I could tell mine. That Friday, my dad announced a family dinner at a restaurant in Beaverton to settle this once and for all. Everyone was supposed to bring their bills so we could make a responsible plan. I agreed to come on one condition: my Aunt Pat had to be there too. He waited almost an hour to reply. Fine. By then I understood exactly what this dinner actually was. It wasn't a conversation. It was 4 emergencies laid on a table at the same time, designed to make saying no look cruel in front of an audience. We walked into a private room at a waterfront grill on Sunday. My mom, my brother, and my sister were already seated. My dad opened with, "Let's agree the airport thing went too far. Nobody expected you to react this dramatically." He called it a harmless lesson about respect. He said I'd embarrassed the family by canceling Mom's birthday. My mom described the lost rental house and the miserable airport hotel. She never once mentioned me standing alone at that kiosk. My sister slid tuition paperwork across the table. My brother laid out supplier estimates for the van he'd lost. My dad set the truck notice and the county tax bill in the center of it all. Nobody asked what I needed. Nobody asked what it would take to actually fix this. I pulled out my phone and read his own text out loud. "Walk home." He frowned and said words spoken in anger shouldn't determine a family's future. "When did you get angry?" I asked. "You canceled my ticket before you even dropped me off. You picked a separate entrance so you'd be gone before I reached the doors. That's not anger. That's planning." My aunt confirmed it. My dad had told her about the plan 2 full days before we ever left for the airport. My dad tried to explain it as venting that got out of hand, but my aunt repeated exactly what he'd told her. He'd planned to exclude me from that flight specifically because I refused to guarantee his loan. He expected a few hours of panic would remind me that being part of the family mattered more than financial caution. He fully expected me to buy a new ticket, fly out later, and keep paying for the whole trip anyway. My mom admitted she'd known there would be a lesson. She'd believed I would just buy another seat and meet them in California, no questions asked. "You knew I'd already paid him back for my own ticket," I said. She looked down at the table and didn't answer that part. I opened a folder I'd brought with me and laid it out. Not an invoice. Not a demand for repayment. I explained that my dad had spent months telling relatives he carried this family financially while I only helped when it suited me. The dates in that folder told a different story. 4 years of tuition payments, truck transfers, tax installments, emergency repairs, and a birthday trip, all covered by me, while I got told I was the one who didn't contribute enough. My dad recovered fast. "So now you're keeping a tally on your own family?" "No," I said. "I started keeping records the day you started rewriting what actually happened." He warned me that if I kept this up, I'd find myself uninvited from every family gathering going forward. "You tried using belonging as leverage once already at that airport," I said. "It's not going to work a second time." 2 days later, my brother texted me a warning from my dad. If I didn't reverse everything, he was coming to my office because he figured I'd listen once my coworkers were watching. I forwarded that message straight to building security and waited. Tuesday morning, security called me before my dad even reached the elevator. My parents had told the front desk it was a family emergency. I agreed to meet them in the lobby with an officer standing nearby. My dad started before I'd even sat down, demanding I restart the truck payment that day. "That's a business problem," I told him. "It's not an emergency involving me." My mom said the county tax plan might fail and they could lose the house. I reminded her the next deadline was still weeks out. There was time to cut expenses, sell something they didn't need, or call the county directly. My dad accused me of humiliating them in public. "You're the one who came to my workplace," I said. "You created this." He said he'd leave once I agreed to restart one truck payment and one tax installment. Employees from half a dozen other companies walked past while he argued that my salary made his demand reasonable. A coworker from my own department saw enough of it to know exactly what kind of emergency this really was. The officer finally stepped in, and both of my parents were walked out of the building. By lunch, my dad was telling relatives I'd had my own parents removed from a building while they begged for help. By evening, the story had turned into me using hospital security against them. Even though our building has nothing to do with a hospital, that detail didn't matter to the people repeating it. My aunt corrected the ones who'd actually listen, using the flight screenshots and my brother's own warning text as proof this had been planned, not provoked. The family split into camps that afternoon, and it never really put itself back together. Some relatives who'd spent years praising my dad for holding this family up were shocked to find out I'd been the one funding the truck, the tax plan, my sister's tuition, and most of that trip. A few apologized for ever texting me. Others said the source of the money didn't matter because family is supposed to share regardless. I stopped responding to any of it one-on-one. I wasn't going to spend my private finances as a public trial for people who hadn't earned the explanation. In the weeks after that, I watched what happens to a family once the quiet money disappears. My dad returned the company truck and started renting equipment only for the jobs that actually needed it. His profit margin dropped, and he turned down 2 bigger jobs outside his usual range because they weren't worth the rental costs anymore. He walked away from the second loan he'd wanted me to guarantee. The business didn't collapse, but it shrank down to what it could actually support on its own. My mom picked up extra hours at the dental office where she worked. My sister filled out federal aid paperwork, applied for 2 local scholarships, and picked up weekend shifts at a rehab clinic to cover what I no longer would. Her graduation slipped by 1 semester, but she finished the program on her own. She mailed me an announcement with no apology attached. I put it in a drawer. My brother lost the van reservation and kept working retail while he saved up enough on his own to start his grooming business smaller. Borrowed trailer, rented tools, weekend markets only. He stopped listing my money as part of the plan. I also noticed something I hadn't clocked while I was still in the middle of it. I hadn't just been writing checks. I'd been tracking deadlines, comparing loan terms, calling the county office on my parents' behalf, and talking everyone off the ledge whenever a plan wobbled. Once I stepped back, they lost a manager, a researcher, and an emergency fund all at the same time, and it showed. My mom told a cousin the family felt disorganized without me. That wasn't proof I belonged back in the role. It was proof they'd been leaning on work they never once thanked me for. A month later, my dad announced a replacement birthday dinner for my mom and told relatives I'd agreed to attend and the family would finally reconcile. Several people messaged me saying they were relieved I'd come to my senses. I had never agreed to a single thing. My aunt found out he was telling guests I'd apologize publicly and restore every payment that night. I could have stayed home and let that version become the official story. Instead, I walked into that banquet room with one sealed folder and my aunt beside me. My dad turned to the room the moment he saw me. There she is, the daughter who's finally seeing reason. People actually applauded. I didn't sit down. Before dinner starts, I need to correct that. I haven't apologized for ending my payments, and I'm not restoring any of them. His smile disappeared. You came here to ruin another birthday. I came because you told a room full of people I made promises I never made. I asked my aunt to repeat what he'd told her before that flight ever left the ground. She did, that he'd planned to cancel my ticket specifically to punish me for refusing the loan, and that he expected me to buy my way back into the trip out of guilt. Then my mom said the thing that ended any version of this story where I was the unreasonable one. I wanted you to need us again just once. You go through your whole life acting like you don't need a single person, and I couldn't stand it anymore. That was the truth underneath every softer excuse either of them had offered for a month. If you don't subscribe before the next chapter, you're going to miss exactly what I pulled out of that folder next, and why it's the part my dad still hasn't recovered from. My siblings tried their usual angles. My sister said she'd apologized privately, and when I asked her exactly when, she admitted it was only after her tuition payment actually stopped. My brother said everyone makes mistakes. I asked him if laughing at a planned humiliation was really a mistake, or a decision he'd expected to have zero consequences. My dad said real family support should never be conditional. I told him voluntary help was never a lifetime contract to begin with. No one had been entitled to my income before that airport, and nobody became entitled to it afterward just because losing it was inconvenient. If this is the moment you've been waiting for, smash that like button now because everything I've been holding back for a month came out in the next 60 seconds. I opened the folder. The first page ended every recurring payment for good. The second barred any further contact at my workplace. The rest held the canceled airline booking, my reimbursement receipt, the walk-home text, my brother's warning message, and copies of what my dad had actually told relatives about all of it. The last page said no contact, no calls, no visits, no social media, full stop. Then I guess you're not my daughter anymore, my dad said. That doesn't scare me the way it used to, I said. You've been holding belonging over my head since that very first dinner. It's stopped working. My mom followed us into the parking lot afterward and asked for 2 minutes alone. She said she missed me, that the photos she'd been sending weren't manipulation, that my dad's pride had made everything worse. Then she asked if I could just cover the next property tax installment one more time. I looked at the woman who'd just told a room full of people she wanted me to feel powerless, and I understood that even her final private moment with me was still a request for money. No, I said, and I walked away. I changed my emergency contact from my mom to my aunt that week. I updated my estate paperwork and pulled every informal authorization my family still had on file for me. Then I sent one last written notice. The personal relationship was over. No demand for repayment, no future date circled for reconciliation. A few months later, I took that California trip on my own terms. Booked a smaller place near the coast, picked every activity myself, no group chat deciding anything for me. The memory of that airport kiosk came back for a second, but I didn't call the moment forgiveness. I called it what it actually was, the first trip in years that belonged entirely to me. My family believed my place among them depended on what I was willing to pay. The second I stopped, I didn't lose my family. I lost a job I never actually applied for. My dad thought canceling one ticket would remind me how much I needed them. Instead, it showed me exactly what they needed from me, and once I finally saw it clearly, I stopped supplying it. They told me to walk home. So I did. I just picked a home where none of them had a key. Now I want to hear from you. If your family had been quietly living on money you never got credit for, would you have canceled it the way I did, or would you have kept paying just to avoid exactly what happened to me? Tell me in the comments below. If this story hit you the way I think it did, hit subscribe and share it with someone who's still playing bank for people who'd never do the same for them. Silent Revenge posts a new one every week, and trust me, this isn't even the hardest one I've got.